90 days. That's how long I kept my head pointed east every single night. Not because a doctor told me to, not because some wellness influencer was pushing a morning routine, because I had followed a thread, an ancient, uncomfortable thread, all the way back to a set of instructions attributed to Thoth himself. And what happened in those 90 nights changed the way I understand sleep, consciousness, and the boundary between the world we live in and the one we visit when our eyes close. I want to be careful here. I'm not going to stand in front of you and tell you this was a clean, linear, explainable experience. It wasn't. The dreams didn't arrive on night one like some kind of cosmic welcome package. They built, they layered, they got stranger and more coherent at the same time, which is a combination that has no business existing, and yet it does. What I'm going to walk you through today is the full picture, the origin of the instruction, what Thoth actually said, or what the texts attributed to him claim he said, about the direction of sleep and its relationship to the dream state, what modern researchers studying sleep orientation have quietly documented, and what 90 days of strict practice actually produced. Stay with me on this one, because if there's any subject in the Hermetic tradition that gets dismissed too fast, it's this. Before we talk about what happened to me, we need to talk about who Thoth is, and more importantly, what kind of authority he carries in the Hermetic world. Thoth is not a minor footnote. In the Egyptian tradition, he is the god of writing, wisdom, magic, and the measurement of time itself. He is the one who weighs words, the one who records. The Greeks eventually folded him into their own tradition as Hermes Trismegistus, Hermes the thrice great, the legendary author of the Hermetic corpus, the foundational texts of Western esotericism. Whether you treat Thoth as a literal divine being, a symbolic archetype, or a human lineage of initiates who wrote under a divine name, the ideas attributed to him have survived for thousands of years. That alone demands respect. The instruction that started this whole experiment appears in a body of Hermetic teaching that deals specifically with the relationship between the physical body and what the tradition calls the subtle body. The part of you that moves through states of consciousness the way water moves through different temperatures. In this teaching, the direction your head points during sleep is not arbitrary. It is a form of alignment, an intentional positioning of the physical instrument in relation to invisible currents. East, in particular, carries specific weight. In the Hermetic framework, East is the direction of rising, of emergence, of initiation. The sun rises in the East. Consciousness, in the Hermetic view, mirrors the solar cycle. To orient your head toward the East during sleep is to point the seat of your awareness, your skull, your brain, the physical home of your dreaming mind, toward the direction of awakening. The symbolism is not decorative. It is structural. The Hermetic tradition treats the body as an antenna and direction as a frequency. Now here's where it gets interesting. The instruction doesn't simply say, sleep east and have nice dreams. It's far more specific than that. The claim in the teaching is that sustained, consistent eastward orientation, practiced over many consecutive nights without interruption, gradually opens what the texts describe as a channel between the waking mind and what they call the Akashic field, or the universal memory. Dreams, in this framework, are not random neural noise. They are transmissions, and the direction of your head during sleep determines, to some degree, the signal clarity of what you receive. I'm Daniel, and on this channel, Hermetic Talk, we don't just read these things, we test them, we sit with them, we take them seriously enough to actually live inside them for a while and then report back honestly. So I did. 90 days. Every night, head east. A compass on my nightstand to confirm it. A journal on the floor beside the bed so I could write without fully waking. And an agreement with myself to document everything, including the nights where nothing happened at all. Because here's what the sources rarely tell you. The instruction comes with a warning. The teaching that describes the eastward orientation also notes that the first phase, roughly the first 2 to 3 weeks, is often characterized by an increase in vivid but disorienting imagery. Not pleasant revelatory dreams, chaotic ones. The tradition describes this as a kind of clearing, the channel, so to speak, being cleaned out before anything coherent can move through it. That framing matters, because without it, most people would stop in week 2 and conclude the whole thing was nonsense. Here's the part of this conversation that usually surprises people. Because when most of us hear something like, the direction you sleep affects your dreams, we mentally file it under mythology and move on. What we don't do is check whether anyone in a laboratory has ever actually looked at this. Some researchers have. There is a body of scientific literature, small, understudied, and largely ignored by mainstream medicine, that examines the relationship between sleep orientation and sleep quality, dream intensity, and even physiological markers like heart rate variability and cortisol levels upon waking. Before we continue, there's something I want to place in your hands. We've gathered 12 years of Hermetic source material, the Corpus Hermeticum, the Emerald Tablets, and more, stripped of fear bait and rebuilt as a working initiatory sequence into a single 3-volume library for those who feel the pull towards something deeper. Because whether we speak of clearing the field of what was never yours, architecting reality through the 7 Hermetic laws as machinery, or building an auric field with weight that walks into a room ahead of you, one truth remains. Understanding without sequence leaves the ground unowned and nothing moves. This is for anyone who's ready to work the initiation in the order it was always meant to be worked. You'll find it in the link in the description below, or you can scan the QR code right here. I'll give you a moment to do that. The findings are not unanimous, but they are not nothing either. One of the more cited observations in this space comes from studies on geomagnetic alignment during sleep. The Earth has a magnetic field. That field runs roughly north-south, and the human body, particularly the brain, with its high concentration of magnetite-containing cells, is not magnetically neutral. Several studies, including research published in sleep medicine journals in Europe, have found that individuals who sleep with their bodies aligned along the geomagnetic north-south axis report measurable differences in sleep quality compared to those sleeping east-west. The mechanism is not fully understood, but the measurement exists. Now, east-west orientation is not the same as north-south alignment, and I want to be precise here because conflating them would be intellectually sloppy. Sleeping with your head pointing east places your body perpendicular to the geomagnetic flow rather than parallel to it. What's interesting is that some of the older Ayurvedic literature, which predates modern sleep science by centuries, specifically recommends east as the preferred sleeping direction for cognitive clarity and spiritual receptivity, and explicitly warns against north for reasons that actually map loosely onto what the geomagnetic research later found about north-oriented sleep disturbing rest. Is this proof that Thoth was right? No. I want to be honest with you. The science here is preliminary. The sample sizes in most of these studies are small, and no researcher has designed a controlled trial around the specific claims of the Hermetic tradition. What exists is a pattern of convergence, independent bodies of knowledge, arriving from different cultures and different centuries, all pointing in the same direction, literally and figuratively. I personally think that convergence is the most underrated form of evidence we have in this space. Not because it proves anything definitively, but because when an agricultural society in ancient India, a mystery school in Hellenistic Egypt, and a sleep medicine lab in contemporary Europe all independently flag the same variable, that variable deserves more attention than it's getting. There's also the neurological angle. The research on REM sleep and directionality is thin, but what exists suggests that body positioning during sleep, including head orientation, can influence blood flow to specific brain regions. This is well established in the context of conditions like sleep apnea, where head and neck position profoundly affect airway and circulation. What's less explored is whether subtle variations in orientation might influence the quality or character of dreaming, which is a neurologically complex state involving multiple brain systems simultaneously. The answer is, we don't know yet. The research hasn't been done rigorously enough to say. But the absence of a study is not the same as the absence of an effect. And what I can tell you is that my personal data, 90 nights of journal documentation, produced a pattern that I couldn't explain away, and that I'll walk you through in full before this is over. One thing the Hermetic tradition and modern neuroscience both agree on, by the way, is that consistency matters enormously. A single night of adjusted sleep orientation is meaningless. The brain needs repetition to establish new patterns. The nervous system adapts through sustained input, not isolated experiments. This is why the instruction attributed to Thoth specifies 90 days, not 7, not 30. 90. That number is not arbitrary. It roughly corresponds to one full seasonal cycle, and it appears repeatedly in initiatory traditions as the minimum duration for an internal shift to consolidate. I started this on a Tuesday in late autumn. Nothing ceremonial about it. I moved the bed, confirmed the orientation with a compass app, set a small notebook on the floor within arm's reach, and went to sleep. The first week was unremarkable. If I'm honest, it was almost discouraging. My sleep felt slightly lighter, like the difference between sleeping in your own bed versus a hotel bed. Not bad, just slightly unfamiliar. The dreams I recorded were ordinary, fragmented, the usual ambient noise of a tired brain processing the day. Week 2 is when things shifted, but not in the way I'd hoped. I mentioned earlier that the Hermetic teaching warns about a clearing phase. I had read that warning, I had noted it intellectually, but reading about something and then living through it are genuinely different experiences. What arrived in week 2 was a sequence of dreams that I can only describe as pressure. Not nightmares in the cinematic sense. No monsters, no obvious symbols. Just an overwhelming sense of density, of things being worked through. I woke several nights feeling like I had been in conversation for hours, but without any memory of what was said. The closest comparison I have is that feeling after an emotionally exhausting day, except nothing emotionally exhausting had happened in waking life. I almost stopped. That's the honest version. On night 11, I wrote in my journal, and I still have this entry. I don't know if this is the clearing or just insomnia with better mythology. That sentence captures exactly how I felt. The kind of doubt that only shows up when you're in the middle of something real, not when you're watching from the outside. I kept going, partly out of stubbornness, partly because I had committed to 90 days publicly. I'd mentioned it briefly at the end of a video on the Emerald tablet, and several people in the comments had said they were trying it alongside me. That accountability mattered more than I expected it to. By day 18, the quality changed. The dreams became sharper. Not more dramatic, sharper. There's a distinction there that's hard to articulate, but unmistakable when you experience it. A sharp dream has an internal logic. It has weight. You wake from it, and the details don't dissolve the way ordinary dreams do. They stay present, sometimes for hours, sometimes all day. By the end of week 3, I was consistently waking with full, coherent dream narratives that I could write down in complete sentences rather than fragments. The tradition calls this the first threshold. The clearing has run its course, and what's on the other side of it is a kind of perceptual quiet, a settling, that makes the dream state more legible. I don't have a better word for it than legible. The dreams started to feel like they were in a language I was beginning to learn, rather than static I was trying to interpret. Around day 25, something specific happened that I haven't talked about publicly before. I dreamed of a library. Not a metaphorical one, an architectural one, with specific hallways, a specific quality of light, specific shelves. And in that dream, I was told, not by a figure, by something closer to a voice without a body, that the East is not a direction, it's a permission. I wrote that down immediately upon waking. I stared at it for a long time. I still don't know exactly what it means, but it's the kind of thing that, once it arrives, you stop asking whether the experiment is working. So let's step back from the personal for a moment, because I think the experiment only makes sense if you understand what it's actually grounded in. When people hear Thoth Instructed, they assume I mean I sat down with a Ouija board, or had some fever vision where an ibis-headed god handed me a compass. That's not what this is. The instruction comes from the Hermetic corpus, from texts attributed to Thoth in his Greek syncretized form as Hermes Trismegistus, and from older Egyptian cosmological frameworks that predate the Hermetic manuscripts by centuries. The East in those frameworks is not arbitrary. It's not feng shui in a casual sense. It's not just face the sunrise and feel good. The East, specifically, is the direction of emergence, of becoming. The sun doesn't just rise in the East, according to Hermetic cosmology. Consciousness itself originates from the East as a directional metaphor for the motion from potential into form. Before we continue, some of what I've learned simply never makes it onto YouTube. That's why we have Insights Academy, a free newsletter where I go deeper into hidden knowledge, ancient wisdom, metaphysics, and the nature of consciousness, the knowledge we don't share in these videos. And when you sign up, you'll receive the Kabbalion as a welcome gift. You'll find it through the link in the description below or by scanning the QR code on your screen. I'll give you a moment to do that. Thoth, as the recorder of cosmic law, as the one who weighs the soul and writes the verdict, is associated with that same motion, the translation of chaos into order, the translation of silence into word. When ancient temple architects oriented their most sacred rooms toward the east, and they almost universally did, they weren't following a trend. They were encoding a cosmological truth into stone, that the act of receiving, of opening, of being written upon, happens most efficiently when you are aligned with the direction of first light. Now, what does that have to do with sleep? Everything. The Hermetic tradition treats sleep not as unconsciousness, but as a different mode of consciousness, one that is actually more permeable to what some texts call the nous, the divine mind or universal intelligence. During waking life, the rational mind acts as a filter. It categorizes, it doubts, it compresses. During sleep, that filter loosens. The question the ancient practitioners were asking, and the question I was implicitly asking by starting this experiment, is whether the body's orientation during that loosened state affects what comes through. Whether alignment with a cosmological axis changes the quality of what the permeable mind receives. The texts suggest yes, emphatically. The instructions in the Hermetic literature around sleep, around dream incubation, around what was called temple sleep in ancient Egypt, are specific about orientation, they're specific about intention, they're specific about what you do in the moments before sleep. Not as ritual performance, but as cognitive positioning. You are not just lying down, you are pointing yourself at something. I'm Daniel, and this is Hermetic Talk. And what I want to be clear about is that I did not walk into this experiment as a true believer. I walked in as someone who had been researching these texts for long enough to think, if this instruction is encoded across multiple independent traditions, across Egyptian cosmology, across early Hermetic practice, across certain Vedic sleep frameworks that echo the same directional logic, then there's something worth testing. Not believing, testing. The difference matters. Because what happened by day 30, day 40, day 50, it stopped feeling like a test. There's a pattern that serious dream researchers, and I mean people working in both the neuroscientific and the esoteric traditions, which overlap more than either side likes to admit, have described as dream serialization. The idea that under certain conditions, dreams don't just occur as isolated events, but begin to form a sequence, a developing narrative, a structure with internal logic that accumulates across nights the way chapters accumulate across a book. I had read about this. I had not experienced it. Until somewhere around day 32. The library dream I mentioned, the one where I was told the East is not a direction but a permission, That wasn't a one-night event. It came back. Not identically, but recognizably. Same architectural logic, same quality of light. And I want to dwell on that phrase for a second because it's the most precise thing I can say. The light in those dreams has a specific temperature, a specific angle. It comes from the upper left of whatever room I'm in, always. And it has the quality of early morning light filtered through old stone. That consistent detail across multiple dreams separated by days is what first made me take notes differently. I stopped writing down what happened in the dreams. I started writing down what remained, the residue. Because that's what serialized dreaming produces. Not a story you can recount linearly, but a feeling state with specific textures that persists into waking life and accumulates. By day 45, I had a notebook that was less a dream journal and more something that looked like field notes from an expedition I couldn't fully remember taking. Words like threshold, recursion, the weight of being seen, language before language. By day 50, I started to notice that the questions arising in my waking research, the texts I was pulling, the connections I was making, were being answered in the dreams before I consciously formed the questions. That's the part I hesitate over, because I know how it sounds, but I'm going to say it plainly. I would be working through a Hermetic concept during the day, encounter something I didn't understand, feel that specific friction of an idea that hasn't resolved yet, and then wake up the next morning with something that felt like a resolution. Not an explanation, a resolution, the way a chord resolves. Something had moved from tension to rest. The Hermetic texts have a name for this process. It's connected to what they call the logos function of Thoth, the idea that divine intelligence communicates not through statements, but through pattern completion. Not, here is the answer, but here is the shape that was missing. A viewer who goes by Aurelius Ascending left a comment on our video about the Emerald Tablet that actually captures this better than I can. They wrote that Hermetic knowledge doesn't explain itself, it demonstrates itself. You either feel the demonstration or you don't. That stayed with me, and it's exactly what days 30 through 60 felt like. Not instruction, demonstration. I personally think this is the most underrated aspect of the entire Hermetic sleep tradition. Not the content of the dreams, but this quality of resolution without explanation. The way the intelligence that seems to operate in that east-facing threshold state doesn't hand you conclusions, it hands you completed shapes. And you spend your waking hours figuring out what they mean. Around day 60, the experiment changed character. The best way I can describe it, the first half felt like tuning a radio, adjusting, finding the frequency. The second half felt like the signal had found me. That shift is worth sitting with because it maps onto something the Hermetic tradition describes very precisely. There's a concept in the corpus around what happens when sustained practice crosses a threshold, when the practitioner stops initiating contact with the higher mind and the higher mind begins initiating contact with the practitioner. The texts frame this not as mystical reward, but as a natural consequence of alignment. If you consistently position yourself, physically, mentally, intentionally, in the orientation that the cosmological framework identifies as receptive, the receptivity eventually becomes structural. It becomes part of how you function, not just something you do. By day 65, I was waking up before my alarm consistently at the same time. Not because I set a different alarm, because something internal had calibrated. The sleep itself had changed texture, and I mean that in the most literal, physical sense. I was moving through sleep stages differently. I know this because I had been tracking with a sleep monitor since the beginning of the experiment, partly for my own curiosity, and partly because I knew that if I was going to talk about this, I wanted something grounded. The data showed, and this is not a dramatic claim, this is just what the numbers said, a measurable increase in time spent in the slow wave and REM stages beginning around week 7. Not transformative, not proof of anything cosmic, but consistent. And consistency in this context means something. I also want to mention something I've shared with a small number of people, but not publicly. Around day 70, I had a dream that I can only describe as architectural, in a way that went beyond the library. I was in a space that had no visible walls, but had a clear geometry, a sense of structure without boundaries. And in that space, I encountered what felt like a record. Not a book, not a scroll, something closer to the way memory feels when you access a very old one, not retrieved, but inhabited. I was not reading something, I was inside something that had already been written. The Hermetic tradition calls this, in various phrasings, the Akashic quality of Thoth's domain. The idea that the divine recorder doesn't just document events, but maintains a living archive, and that in sleep, in the right orientation, in the right state, you can access not information, but presence within that archive. I am not making a metaphysical claim here. I am describing an experience and noting that the tradition I was studying had a pre-existing vocabulary for it. What that means philosophically is a conversation for another time. What it meant practically was that I woke up from that dream with a sense of weight. Not dread, weight. The kind you feel when you've been somewhere real. The days between 70 and 90 had a different quality than anything before. The dreams didn't escalate in intensity, they deepened. The way a river doesn't get louder as it gets older, it gets slower and wider and carries more. By day 80, I had stopped thinking of the experiment as an experiment. I was simply living inside a practice. And that, I think, is exactly what the Hermetic tradition intends. Not a finite test with results, an ongoing alignment, a daily reorientation toward the direction of emergence, toward the east, toward the permission. Day 90 arrived without ceremony. There was no final dream that summarized everything. No vision of Thoth handing me a scroll with conclusions written on it. Just morning light and a notebook full of things I'm still working through, and a quiet sense that I had changed the shape of something inside myself without fully understanding the new shape yet. So what do 90 days of east-facing sleep actually teach you? Here's what I can say with confidence. First, intention prior to sleep is not ceremonial decoration. It is the mechanism. The Hermetic framework, and this is one of the oldest and most consistent threads across the entire corpus, holds that the mind's last dominant state before sleep is the seed that the dream state germinates. What you carry into sleep is what the permeable mind works with. When you combine directional orientation with conscious intention, when you deliberately position yourself toward east and then hold a specific question or concept in mind as you fall asleep, you are not performing a ritual. You are setting a cognitive trajectory. The dreams that follow are not random. They are, in some functional sense, responsive. Second, the east-facing orientation specifically seems to interact with what the tradition calls the solar principle, the animating, clarifying, ordering intelligence that the Hermetic texts associate with Ra in his Egyptian form and with the Logos in the Greek Hermetic tradition. Sleeping with your head toward the east is, in the symbolic language of that cosmology, positioning your mind toward the source of that ordering intelligence during the hours when the mind is most open to being ordered. Third, and this is the thing I keep coming back to, the thing that I think matters most for anyone considering this practice, 90 days is not a shortcut. It is a commitment to a process that rewards patience and punishes the desire for dramatic results. The most significant shifts happened quietly. They happened in the accumulated texture of waking life, not in any single explosive dream. I spent 3 months tracking, journaling, cross-referencing what I was experiencing with what the text described, and the revelation, if you can call it that, was gradual. Like watching a photograph develop in a dark room. You don't see the image arrive, you just eventually realize it's there. I want to circle back to something from earlier in this channel's work, because it connects directly to where I am now. In our video on the Hermetic principle of correspondence, as above, so below, we talked about how that principle isn't just a poetic phrase, but a functional instruction. The macrocosm and the microcosm mirror each other, and the practitioner's task is to find the points of resonance. What this 90-day experiment taught me is that the body's orientation in space is one of those resonance points. The direction you face during sleep is not metaphorically connected to cosmological alignment. In the Hermetic framework, it is literally a form of correspondence. You are enacting the principle in 3 dimensions, in the dark, every night. And over time, the enactment becomes the understanding. There's one more thing I want to say before we move into what comes next in this series, and it's the thing I've been most reluctant to articulate, because it sounds like a conclusion, and I'm not sure it is. But here it is. Somewhere around day 85, I stopped dreaming about Hermetic concepts and started dreaming in Hermetic structure. The difference is significant. I wasn't dreaming about Thoth, about the Emerald Tablet, about correspondence and causality and the noose. I was dreaming in the mode of those things. The logic of the dreams had shifted from content to grammar, from what was being said to how reality was being organized. And I woke up from those final days of the experiment with a conviction that I can't fully justify, but also can't dismiss. That the east-facing instruction from the Hermetic tradition is not about where you sleep. It's about what you become willing to receive. The direction is the posture. The posture is the practice. The practice, sustained, becomes something that doesn't need a name, only continuation.